and lit protocol. All right. So welcome everyone. Thanks so much for being here and join us for our panel on mass adoption of Web3 social. So this is part of MetaWeb, where I work, MetaWeb research initiative. Each of the episodes we will invite like top industry leaders to talk about one subject. But anyway, so this panel, mass adoption of Web3 social. We all know the end game of Web3 social is to reach mass adoption. And then the bottlenecks here are now, number one, user onboarding experience. Number two, self-custody of your crypto assets. Number three, unique value add of Web3 social in terms of user experience. So today we are going to dive deeper into these three aspects and try to see how we're up to and then what social Web3 is going to be like in 1 or 2 years. So without further ado, let's start with a brief introduction. Chris.
I'll use this. Hi, my name is Chris Kolzinski. I'm one of the original co-founders of Tinder. I was one of the inventors of the swipe, co-creator of Bumble as well, and I'm building in the Web3 space with a company called Niche. It's in the Web3 social kind of reinvention of how we all organize together. DAOs for everybody, basically.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Hupel-Scher. I'm one of the co-founders of Meme, and we're building tools for portable communities. So that is communities that exist outside the bounds of any single platform, and instead are organized around something they want to do together or a shared interest. And so we're enabling those communities to create their own on-chain agreements and then connect that agreement to either existing tools or newly built tools that enable collaborative publishing.
Awesome. Excited to be here. Thank you for those of you who are here. My name is David. I'm one of the co-founders at Lit Protocol. It is a distributed key management network, and what that means is essentially like a distributed custodian uses something called multi-party computation and threshold cryptography to custody a key across a distributed network of nodes. And just like with public key cryptography in general, there's two services that this network provides, which is encryption and digital signatures, which both have implications in the context of Web3 social. On the encryption side, things like access control, token-gated content, and various other things that you can do around conditional encryption when you want to store private data on the open web. And then on the digital signature side, user onboarding. Basically, how do we get to the point where we have decentralized multi-factor authentication, where somebody can create a Web3 wallet in a way that there's Web2 UX parity, meaning that the flow of multi-factor authentication is the exact same as it is in Web2, no custodying a seed phrase, et cetera, but also without having to rely on a centralized custodian essentially in a system that is fault tolerant.
My name is Nader Dabbit. I am the Director of Developer Relations at Aave Companies, including Lens Protocol, which is a Web3 social network, and actually a Web3 social protocol. And I'm also the founder of Developer DAO, which is a social and educational community.
Great, thank you. Yeah, let's start. I guess my first question would lean toward user onboarding experience for David. So, so everyone knows like, for Web2 users to come into Web3, you know, they need to set up a wallet, they need to like take care of their like seed phrases. It's really annoying, right? With the current tech stack nowadays and evolving technologies in account abstraction and MPC, how do you see the user onboarding experience for Web2 users be like in a year or two?
Yeah, it's not going to take that long. If you go to getlit.dev/demo, there's on that page, you can click a button and generate a new wallet. That wallet is custodied by Lit, this distributed key management network, and the authorization method to use that wallet is something called WebAuthn. Apple has a branded version of that called Apple Passkey, which is thumbprint or fingerprint touch on the computer and biometrics based on the phone. And the cool thing about Passkey, like out of the box, this works across all Apple devices, et cetera. So I would say we're like 4 to 6 months away from being able to have the one login for the entire internet that is user credential driven, self-sovereign, but also has that Web2 UX parity and feel.
Got it. Yeah, that sounds to be like super convenient for people coming into Web3 and then managing all of their logins. How do you see like the role of private keys are evolving with account abstraction? Because it can be seedless and then it can be broken away into like different pieces through a network. What do you see like the role of private keys will play in the future compared to today, maybe?
Well, I mean, the underlying technology of public key cryptography of an asymmetric key pair isn't changing. There's certainly some really interesting stuff around account abstraction, which is like a programmable account on Ethereum, sometimes called a smart contract wallet. And to date, some of the most interesting stuff that has been implemented is around gasless transactions. Nader and team have done some pretty fascinating stuff there. So user experience isn't just like getting one thing right and then everything falls into place. You have to get everything right. So there's a lot of aspects to it. And certainly account abstraction has a role to play in that. But it's part of a longer and sophisticated discussion around it's related to the app chain hypothesis. If it turns out that we're interacting with 500 to 1,000 different blockchains on a month-over-month basis, that means we need to then launch smart contract wallets on all of those chains. And so the costs associated that start to come into play. And I think, to me, that's one of the really interesting points in the context of like MPC versus account abstraction. But there's also ways for these technologies to play together. For example, there's a gentleman by the name of Corbin Page who has a product called Patch Wallet. And that is a mechanism for somebody to, in a single click, generate a new wallet. It's tied to their Twitter OAuth, so it's one click to onboard. But the MPC key is a signer on the AA wallet. And when that person gets used to Web3 and starts interacting, later on they can call a function to eject to the MPC signer and move to a self-custody key, like a ledger or similar later on. And it really provides this kind of smooth onboarding ramp in terms of getting into Web3 and keeping the optionality open to move to self-custody for the people on this planet who are excited about that and see it as a privilege rather than those that see it as a burden, being your own bank, that is.
Got it. Yeah, I guess like based on David's comments, I feel like in the future, number one, setting up a wallet is super simple. Managing your accounts is super simple. And then I think one of the really powerful thing here is also like the composability of the technology. We talked about account abstraction, we talked about MPC, and then Nader is going to share with like some of the fundamental technology working on with Lit together. So like everything is highly composable, but together they're super powerful. But currently we are still like scratching only the surface. Okay, I guess like it covers a lot of my next question, which is how do you see like self-custody would be self-custody would be like? Currently people are really stressed about like their seed phrases, and then is it going to be changed completely in the future?
Does anybody else have a thought on are we going to be a self-custody future or not?
I mean, I think that when you look at the user experience, we're talking about Web3 social here, right? So like the user experience of Web3 social versus traditional social. Traditional social, you sign in with Google account, 5 seconds, you write a tweet and you post and everything works and you're happy. In Web3 social or in Web3 applications, you ask that user to first go to Coinbase and open an account and buy the right token, send that token on the right network to the right wallet, understand how that wallet works. Then you ask them to actually not fuck up and lose their keys and stuff, because then they lose everything and they walk away with a bad experience. And then we ask them to pay money to actually use your app. And then we expect them to wait 5 seconds for the transaction to finalize. And then finally, anytime they do anything, we expect them to sign every single time. So overall, the experience, if you kind of use the networks as they exist today, is actually really, really bad. And wallets are just the first entry point into that. And I think the answer to your question is, like, we need to kind of have some trade-off, because if you can't expose this low-level primitive to the world. 99% of the world just doesn't want to deal with this stuff. I don't even like dealing with this stuff. Instead, I think you're going to have wallets for financial activity, and you might have a wallet for social activity. The social wallet might have, you might say, okay, I'm going to allow Lens to post on my behalf with this wallet, and or I might use some account abstraction and kind of delegate that to a social account that I already have. but like you wouldn't go and put $1 million in that wallet or even $1,000. Instead, you might use that for that type of activity. I think that's where we're headed. We can't keep saying, oh, we're 6 months away, we're 12 months away from getting it right. Instead, you kind of have to deal with what we have today. We're able to kind of build a really high quality UX today with trade-offs in decentralization. And those trade-offs are getting better, and the underlying primitives are still decentralized, but the middle layer doesn't have to be. And that middle layer, I think, is where we're seeing all of the innovation happening today. Like if you look at all of the protocols that I'm excited about are the ones that have sprung up in the last year. Stuff like Bundler Network, for example, provides a middle layer between, Arweave. It takes like a very, very quick transaction time as opposed to a long transaction time. It's more accessible, but it's centralized. So like I think we're seeing more and more of that centralization as a trade-off, whereas the underlying tech is still decentralized, but we need to provide a better UX.
Got it. Yeah, I think it sounds super, super bullish. Is there anything that you guys still want to add on top of Nader's view?
I think you're absolutely right. If you can get it down to like a one-button Web2 sign-up, that's where mass adoption happens. Just specifically at Niche, we've gotten it down to like I can send you a text invite from my DAO that I'm in. We'll create you a custodial wallet in the background through Google Storage. We don't even get the keys ourselves. Mint you the NFT that grants you permission for the group, and now you've got a custodial wallet with an NFT. Like my mom has an NFT in a custodial wallet, and she can't even work the TV remote. You know what I mean? So the lighter the barriers, the more mass adoption, for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, the UI challenge in front of us over the next couple of years is how do we sell the value of SSI and, data portability and all of these great features of a Web3 wallet while obscuring the crypto for the 95% of users that, are not attracted to that and often are turned off by that.
I'll attempt to steelman your point a little bit, which is I think there's actually a distinction between what you're saying and what Nader is saying, which is there's a real key distinction between something that's like custodial or centralized versus something that is progressively decentralized, which is to say that the thing that is progressively decentralized is attempting to make a network and is by default going to be an open system, which lets you get that interoperability benefit. And so, like, a lot of teams that have built custodial wallets have been like, hey, can we integrate with Lit? And we're just like, it makes absolutely no sense for us to like do individual integrations with custodial wallets. And so even like a bundler, if you're in this process of progressive decentralization, the fact that you're building something from the network context rather than the pure centralized context lets you get that interoperability benefit while the underlying technology is becoming distributed. But there's shades of gray, of course. And I tend to agree with your point also.
Great. Yeah. Then I guess now let's dive deeper into Web3 social in particular. So this question I want to give it to Chris. You are the co-founder of Tinder. You are the co-creator of Bumble. What was the experience of designing successful social product? What from Web3 that attracted you to come and build? What would be like the next killer product that you think you can only build with Web3 technologies?
I think making the move from Web 2 to Web 3, there's definitely a technological barrier, I think, for traditional Web 2 builders. But if you can get past the technology, I think what the value props that it enables us to give to new consumers, I think sets a new bar for what the new products are going to be. Because I think the more we can abstract away the technology and give people the benefit of it, right, that's when people are going to start to use things and see benefit of it. Because, if I'm going to be in a decentralized network just for the sake of being in a decentralized network, what's the point of it? I could just as well go to Twitter or whatever. There's got to be some type of overall thing that can only happen in a decentralized network, right? So it's taking a hypothesis on the technology rather than just putting the technology forward. And it's a real challenge, I think, for Web 2 founders to get over that technological barrier and understand and digest it all down into what is that core benefit.
Yeah, I agree. I think the abstraction of technology is really important. And speaking onto this, I think Lens is awesome in this sense because the clear value propositions that every people know about Web3 is decentralization, or decentralized data ownership and the incentive layers. And then, on that layer, Lens has already built the good infrastructure that developers can use and then focus more on the product market fit and then what the unique user experience of Web3 social there is. So on this, Nader, can you tell us more about like if I'm like a Web2 social application founder coming to Lens, what can I build? What are the tools?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with everything like with what you just said, and understanding your background and stuff. It's really awesome to see you here. So just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, I mean, I think that we care about decentralization, but really no one else cares. You know, if they're not in the blockchain space and we tell them the value prop is decentralization, they're gonna like roll their eyes or whatever. But decentralization brings about things that are possible that we can kind of hopefully represent in our applications that we don't have to explain to people. They'll just use it and realize, oh, this is just better. And I think that that's where we're headed. That's where we're focused. And I think that's where a lot of the more like successful products are going to land in the next 6 to 12 months. They're going to, abstract away the infrastructure, like he mentioned. They're going to build higher quality products with a better user experience. And we have to realize that, again, people don't care about blockchain, the average person. If we want someone to use our app, it just needs to be better, period. So it lends some of the stuff that we're doing to make that possible. You mentioned the gasless transactions. We're basically treating our blockchain infrastructure like AWS or Google Cloud is treated by Twitter and Instagram and everyone else. Like, we don't expect someone to pay for that. We subsidize that because you can do that now because the protocols are now less than 1 penny to transact. They're getting cheaper and cheaper. Data availability experimentations are happening. We're getting to the point where, the infrastructure can completely be subsidized. Therefore, the user obviously shouldn't have to pay for that. Like, we're way beyond that, I think. The next step is to implement user experiences that automate the signing of transactions for low-value transactions like posting and commenting and stuff. So that's what Lens does as well. We've built a centralized API layer that abstracts away all this stuff. You sign up into an app, you start posting, and you close the app, and it feels just like Twitter. But you now also have built-in payments for experiences like, for example, we had a creator that quit their job and they posted on Lens, hey, I'm quitting my job to work on a Lens app full time. If you want to support me, you can collect this post for $2. And for $2, it basically turns it into an NFT. But you wouldn't think that an NFT, because most NFTs we're used to are worth like $1,000 and $10,000, $100,000, but at scale, he had 10,000 or 12,000 people collect this. He made $25,000 off of essentially was a 5-second tweet. And stuff like that just isn't possible with other types of infrastructure. So we need to kind of build more experiences that enable stuff like that, and just really also build really high quality developer experience, because we want developers to be experimenting and building out new interfaces and then seeing what happens, what works, what doesn't work, a lot of experimentation. So that's just a general idea of some of the stuff we're working on.
Yeah, and I really like the way that you articulated that. And like in the beginning, you said the benefits of decentralization, then you got to the digital assets and digital ownership, which is like the big benefit. And one of the things that I really like about Lens is I feel like it really nails the mental model of what it is to be a creator in Web3, which is like you're just kind of generating artifacts in perpetuity that may or may not become collectibles over time, right? If like the Beatles were doing that when they first started and you were the first one to catch that wave and they released like a 1 of 100 thing or an early post that got collected, all of a sudden that becomes like, maybe that artifact becomes a collectible over time, and then that's the way that we work together, for example, is then that collectible can, like additional utility can be imbued into it, like letting you decrypt content, for example, in the case of gated publications.
Great, yeah. I guess then my next question would be, like a year ago, everyone when talking about like Web3 social, it's like social-fi. Like social and finance seems to be like Web3 social, but then they might not be, right? So like, how do you understand about like the fi in social? Do you think financial infrastructure is really important in Web3 social?
Yes.
Agree?
Yes. Every single like social circle or network that I'm in, whether it's IRL or whether it's digital, even Web3, has some type of consumerism associated with it. Like I use Facebook groups specifically. I don't like Facebook personally, but I collect Star Wars stuff, like the old Star Wars stuff. That's where the people that collect Star Wars people are. So I have to go to where the people are, right? So I think it's contingent upon what your networks do, who they are, and like what you're passing back and forth. And like I said, I would challenge you to find some group that doesn't have some aspect of consumerism, whether it's like doing events together or like like we got to raise $20 to all go to whatever, and because it's all built in with Web3. It's just there for us. I mean, there's so much value that gets leaked out in Web 2 products through the payment process, through marketplaces, through any type of that. All that value is just like literally gone, and as well as consumer confidence. If I use PayPal for X, Y, and Z, Sorry, rant.
Yeah.
That's the end of my rant on that stuff.
No, I think what Chris said that I really like is it's really up to the community. Like, let's let the communities tell us how financial transactions play into their community, like what those value exchanges that they want to have and with whom. And absolutely, we should allow them to plug in the tools to enable that. That's one of the key advantages of Web3. I think when we lead with the tokenomics, when we talk about communities in Web3, we can see some distorted incentives. And so I think our view is always like lead with the communities, let them decide how they want to design their communities and the financials, and then let them plug in the tools that let them do that.
Yeah, just for, I totally agree. There's like very much a DAO worldview as it relates to social and social finance. And then on the other end of the spectrum is the degen worldview, right? Like StepN from Solana and things like that. And so it's pretty interesting. There's definitely this conversation that emerges, which is like, what's the killer app that is going to get to 1 million users in a week in the same way that like Facebook and Snapchat did as it relates to the method of interaction? And for better or worse, like, degen-based applications are the things that have like gotten overnight success and crazy traction in the world of like looking for hits and experimentation as it relates to like social media products in general, not just in Web3.
Great. Yeah, I guess like just now, like we mentioned the word community several times, and it's like a DAO panel as well. So I think one thing that I see unique in Web3 social is the community-driven social networking. Like we have so many small DAOs, people come together, talk about something they're interested in. They can have like AMA spaces. We rarely see this kind of interaction happening so recurrently and so frequent in Web2 world. So can you guys let us know a little bit more about how you guys think about like community-driven social networking and then DAO for everybody? I know like Chris and Sarah, you guys are building something related to that. Can you let us know more?
Yeah, sure, I can start. So we are all about portable communities, and we see the atomic unit of building for communities as this community agreement. So what's the underlying, you can think of it as like a self-sovereign identity at the community level. So what does it mean for a community to have a singular credential that contains all of the design nuances of that community? Who's in it? What's required to be a part of this community? What roles and permissions do the members have? What tools do they want to use together? And then that basically becomes a credential that they can use to access tools across the web. And those could be Web 2 tools too. So I think sometimes when we talk about community and we talk about Web 3, we're talking about DAOs. But actually, if we're talking about really onboarding the world's users to Web3, we need to think of community in a much broader term, in a much broader sense. And so we think of communities as really any group of people who want to do anything together. And so you start thinking about, what would it look like if I can show up with my singular identity? I can be a part of hundreds of communities, which sounds overwhelming when you define that as DAOs, but is actually much more nimble when you think of it as like, oh, I'm a member of my neighborhood. I am one of 2 members in the community that is my marriage. I am a parent in this school district. I am a member of the meme team. Like, I'm a part of dozens, if not hundreds of communities every single day. And so I think the promise of Web3 is that you can show up with one identity and participate in a bunch of different communities. And what we're trying to enable is that you have the tools to do what you want to do with each of those communities in a really scaled way. So I think the other advantage of it is it's incredibly convenient. And when we think about onboarding users, imagine like you run a book club, for example, right? And today in the Web 2 world, you invite your book club members, you maybe discuss books together on WhatsApp, you create a discussion guide on Google Docs, you post reviews to Goodreads, and then someone wants to join your group. It's a really annoying process right now to add them to all of those different channels and platforms. And so really what the promise of Web3 holds a few years down the road is that you add someone to your community and suddenly overnight they have the right permissions, the right access to all of the tools that they want to use together. That's a very powerful onboarding mechanism.
You mentioned DAOs for everybody too. So to follow with community, I think the thing that really attracts us at Niche around this is, like, you're right. You're in networks that drive identity, background, shared interests, hobbies, all that kind of stuff. The thing that makes it all possible for us is DAOs, because DAOs allows decentralized ownership, distributed ownership, right, and privacy. And what that means to the end consumer is it gives them agency over their networks, and then I think it gives them ownership over what they actually produce in that networks. And then if you can distill all that down to something of, like, you know, you own the networks that you're in, you have agency over how they run, that's a digestible value prop, I think, to everyday users, like a Facebook group user.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think, like, you know, after this panel, I feel like, number one, user onboarding is like simple and fast. Custody is more stressless. People get to manage their different accounts, granting them different assets and permissions. And then there are protocols building like really strong fundamental layer that embed all of the fundamental value adds of, well, the core fundamental value add of Web3 social, of decentralized ownership and incentive layer. And then we talked about the financial incentives, you know, the potential of monetization on top of this network. And one more really unique thing is the community-driven, DAO-centric social networking. I think that's, I think, like, whenever I think about only the buzzwords or the gimmick, it's like really vague. But then if we look at like all of these small puzzles, technical puzzles coming together, composability, that's really powerful. So like we still have like 2 more minutes left. Let's go through one thing that you want to tell the audience about you guys, or like in what circumstances they should talk to you.
You guys start first.
Okay, yeah, so if you want to check out Lens Protocol as a developer, definitely check out our docs, docs.lens.xyz. If you want a handle, come find me or go to the Lens booth, pick up some swag, and that's about it. Thanks for checking us out. You've been a great moderator. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And if you want to look at programmatic signing and conditional encryption via a distributed key management network, you'll see a few people floating around with a lit LED cube today. Also, all the docs are at litprotocol.com. And yeah, excited to be here. Thanks again.
Cool, yeah. Did I really lose this? Thank you. I'll trade you back. Cool, so we are at meem.wtf, and you can check out one of the first tools that we're working on, which is a community publishing tool called Symphony. It allows the members of a community to decide together in Discord what to publish to a shared Twitter account. And we'll be adding more platforms in the future. So you could, you know, decide in Slack together what to publish to Lens, for example. So more to come, but we'd love you to check it out and give us feedback.
You can download Niche in the iOS App Store. We're iOS only right now only. We're in open beta. Niche member-owned clubs. It's NFT-gated, interest-based clubs. Check it out. We're going to start monetizing, I think, maybe next week. So we're going to run a little charity test. If anybody wants to talk about NFT-gated social networks, let me know.
Great. So like, yeah. So this is our very first episode of Future Finality, our research media series. After each panel, we are going to research. We are going to also release a research article on top of what we have discussed, and then a little bit more of the fundamental understanding of social fi. We will keep bothering you guys in terms of, you know, the views today. We try to like get into all these like fundamental pieces of social fi together so that people can understand the technologies. We're building something real, rather than only the jargons. So follow us at MetaWeb, Twitter at MetaWebVC. We'll see you around.
Woohoo! Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.